This presentation covers painting 6mm Micro-Armour figures. This does not cover painting techniques. Instead, it focuses on arriving at the optimum or correct colour for your 6mm figures. The way the eye perceives colour varies a great deal based on the distance the eye is from the object. When looking at a medium tank, in order to see the entire vehicle, you may or must decide to stand back from it, such as 10 metres. However, when we are looking at a 6mm figure, we are often much closer to it, possibly 20 to 30 centimetres, and no more than 1 metre. This difference in distance has a major impact on perceived colour. One side note about this presentation, the purpose is to actually use basically model train painting techniques to arrive at the correct perceived colour for a particular model. Now, in the 6mm world, the same rules would apply. However, my advice, which is, changing the darkness or lightness of various colours in order to achieve what is actually accurate when you're looking at a 6mm figure compared to a real figure, is possibly going into far more detail than most gamers would ever possibly or should go down. My general advice at this point is that just use good quality paints which claim that they are a particular colour, such as, Russian green for World War II, etc. Colours do vary a great deal, so, even if you don't get 100% correct, quite frankly, there's no such thing as 100% correct. So that's really the caveat I wanted to raise. Now let's go into looking at model railway colour perception formulas. A good method to demonstrate what I'm talking about is to use some dark coloured paper or cardboard and cut out a 3cm square and a 9cm square. Place the 3cm square piece 1 foot from the edge of the table, standing it up so as if you look from the table edge you will see the 3cm square face on. Now do the same with the 9cm square, but place it 3 feet from the edge. Line it up so when you're looking from the edge of the table you can see both squares next to each other and apparently the same size. You will notice the 9cm square is lighter. The colours shown here is supposed to represent World War II Russian protective green, or AMT4. You will notice a large difference between the colours, which always used to puzzle me. My assumption is Tamiya is providing the correct colour while Mr. Hobby is factoring in the fact you are using it for a small model. To make things worse, the opposite occurs when we're dealing with light colour, so white never looks pure white from a distance. This is an issue if you want to attempt to paint 6mm figures and get it to look the way it should, as if you are looking at real size vehicles. The model train community have known about this effect for many years and have a wide range of formulas they use to get the correct colours for their trains. One simple formula is when painting a 1 in 76 scale model, you need to mix 15% matte white into the paint. If it's 1 in 48 scale, the number drops to 5%. In the other direction, I have no idea what formula they use, but clearly the ratio is not linear. Let's look at an example of a 15% lightening effect or lightening effect. On the left is supposedly the correct colour. On the right is the colour mixed with 15% matte white. You can see a significant difference, and on the first impression, this feels like the correct colour to use for Russian tanks, that is the one that's got the 15% matte white. In the centre is a coloured photo of a Russian tank. I must point out, coloured photos rarely show the correct colours, so do not focus on the colour. Instead, focus on its apparent lightness or darkness. And what you see is the colour on the right is closer to what you see in the photo of the actual vehicle. The box under the tank is my estimate of the apparent colour of the tank, and while its RGB values differ, the apparent darkness is perfect. I inspected the RGB values of the best selection of the tank hull colour when I came to this conclusion. If you went right up to the Russian tank and looked at it looked at a 3cm square, the colour would be closer to the colour on the left. I estimate the camera is about 5 metres from the tank, maybe more, which means if you are 65 centimetres away from a 1 in 76 scale model, the colour would be correct. As I'm about this distance from the screen, it does look correct. There is a lot of assumptions here, and this feels like it's correct for 1 in 76 scale models, and possibly even other scales. We will investigate this in more detail. Let's compare this with MIG paints, which are designed to be used with 15mm figures. While the colour itself looks wrong, which could be an effect of the colour picture, the darkness is a lot closer than Tamiya. I am certain photos give you wrong colours because I have a bottle of protective green with me now and it looks a lot like my estimate for the colour of Russian protective green. Now we have another bit of complexity to deal with, the thickness of the paint. I normally water down my paints to give my figures more contrast. This way the bits which stick up are lighter than the bits which are embedded in the figure. This has the effect of lightening up the paint, although even using this technique the colour is still too dark. Based on this example, the best choice would be Tamiya NATO Green, which I must admit I have heard other gamers state is the best colour for Russian tanks World War II as well. Mixing white with your Tamiya dark green is the actual closest, and while MIG is not, here, MIG 23 protective green looks very close to this as well, and it's probably the best colour to use if you use a spray gun, not a dry brush. My formula, derived from Rail Hobbiness, was designed for 1 in 76 scale, which I think is 28mm. This seems to feel correct, and the formula does change with scale. So what should we do about the difference between, let's say, 28mm and 6mm? My gut feel is if you dilute your paint with water to get the effect I mentioned earlier, you get a sufficient lightening effect to compensate for the scale difference. We also need to remember the effect is not based on the scale of the actual figure, but on the distance you view it. My railway formula is based on viewing the model from 60cm away, which is a distance you may also view 6mm fig. 30cm is possibly the closest you would get, so the lightening effect does not need to be as great as you would expect. At least that's my opinion. I could be totally wrong, and we would need to continue the lightening effect if we want it to be technically correct. If we go with 30% matte paint, white, the colours are as shown here. This could be correct, but it does seem a bit light for me. The 30% figure is based on halving the viewing distance, which again is another wild guess on my part. The rail community claims the light colours need to be darkened, but provides no value that I could find. I need to understand why the colours change, and my only guess is it's affected by the average lighting condition you are viewing in. Most people sit in an environment which has colours around them, which have the effect of darkening everything. Photographers normally use a 22% grey sheet to reflect light to get a natural effect. So I'm assuming we all live in a 22% darkened world, on average, assuming that makes any sense to anyone. If this is correct, then when an apparent colour darkness drops below 22%, from a distance it will look darker. This is because the background 22% is merging in with the actual object's lightness, or ability to reflect light. So white, which has an RGB value of 255, 255, 255, would look 22% darker over some unknown distance. If we use our 15% estimate, we need to mix our background colour into the actual colour on a ratio of 15% to 85%. That's 15% a black and 85% white. On the left is pure white, and on the right is our white mixed in with this supposed background colour, which is a grey. This does seem reasonable, and you can actually test this with the table edge experiment I mentioned earlier. As I lack a table which is 5 meters in length, I had to extrapolate, but the whites were darker over a distance. If my theory is correct, then there is no change in colour by distance when the colour that you're looking at has an overall darkness of 22%. If we look at the German dark yellow, or Dunkelgelb, we can estimate that its black and white darkness is 150, 150, 150. This is greater than our background value. So how would it be affected when we factor in the background value? As you can see, there is a slight lightening effect, but it's not very great. If we look at Tamiya dark yellow, which is darker and possibly the correct German dark yellow colour, using Mr. Hobby may give you the correct level of lighting effect. In summary, the distance effect is greater for darker colours and much less for lighter colours that approach this magic 22% in average lighting condition. Obviously, if you live in the north of Germany, where the background light is a lot less than 22%, it'll be different from, let's say, the mountains of Bavaria, where there's a lot more light. For my final calculation, I'll be using the Tamiya dark yellow, as I suspect Tamiya provides a colour which is closest to the real colour used by the Germans, but of course over distance it's not correct. Based on my grand theory summary, the formula is as follows. The background light varies. It's darker when lighting conditions are poor and lighter when lighting conditions are brighter. I'm using a photographer's 22% background, but as an example, in the desert condition, it would be much less. When we view an object at 5 meters, I think about 20% more of the background light mixes in with the color of the object than if we viewed it from 60 centimeters. The reason why this is 20% instead of 15% is the example which uses 15% mixed in is pure white. In this example, we are mixing in the background color which is not pure white, so some maths need to be done, which you can do in a spreadsheet if you so desire. Players can create a formula for this, but using RGB values only gives you a starting position. Due to the wide variables associated with real paint, you would need to test it to verify if the colour is correct, but I suspect this is a good starting point. Using my original example with Russian protective green, we arrive at the following result. The colour I will use for the Russians is NATO green from Tamiya. Based on my information, the British base colour is the same as the Russians. I find this rather odd, and I feel the British should be much darker or touch darker, so I may try a darker Mr. Hobby H302. But first I will test this idea on my Russians. I have no idea if this is correct, but I will test it and to determine. My current Russian and British figures are simply too dark, while my Germans, painted with dark yellow, are good. Just a note, I did go ahead and test it and didn't actually get to the kind of results that I wanted. In the end, I went with a paint that specifically said it was Russian protective green, rather than trying to mix the colours up myself. I actually do advise that all players or gamers should do this, mainly for the reason that while I think I could have got it right using my formula, the trouble is that every time you need to paint these figures, you've got to mix up a new batch, and the chance of the colours being different is simply too great. So my strong advice is all this formula stuff makes sense, and if you want to really be hyper detailed, creating a diorama, it may be of use, as the train community finds it of use, but from a modeller's point of view, you're better off just finding a high quality paint that actually says it's the correct colour and just go with it. Even if it's slightly out, it won't be too much out. Let's look at some examples from the GHQ website. I personally think these figures look great. They all look lighter than my estimated green colour, but as we discussed, my estimate is based on 1 in 76 scale figures. When we go down to 6mm, we need to lighten the paint and thin it out. This looks like it's been thinned out and lightened, so I think I am on the correct track. This concludes my video, or my experimental video, on colours and painting. As I indicated earlier, I'm basically going to go with high quality paints that says they're the correct colours, because it just gets too difficult if you want to try and calculate the correct colours based on distance, etc. Denken Sie daran, immer für Ihr Heimatland zu kämpfen.